What's going on, everybody? Jesse here. Welcome back to another episode in the inventory system. In today's episode, we're going to build the inventory slot widget so that we can start adding items to our inventory system. By the end of today's video, your inventory should look like this when you pop it up. You've got the item slots here within the inventory with a little bit nice border. Every time we hover over it, select it, you can see just a slight blue overlay there on the button when we press it. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Before we get started, I'd like to say thank you to the names of the people that you see on the screen right now. They are my Patreon supporters. Your support means the world to me, and I do appreciate anything and everything that you do. If you'd like to support the channel, then go ahead and look down in the description and you will see links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee page. And you can also come on over and join the Discord. So sit back, relax, and let's get this going. Before we get started, one of the things I'd like to talk about real quick is the fundamental of trying to make your code modular and portable to be used, something that you can be used within other games and other systems, other projects, whatever you have going on. And whether you've noticed it or not, that's one thing I've been trying to do with this inventory system is trying to make sure that it's going to be portable to other systems. So it can just ultimately just be a drag and drop type of operation. One way to see how well you're doing to see if your code is becoming modular, if it's getting a little bit out of hand, is if you go into your content browser here. For us in this particular project, we've been working on the inventory. So this is the inventory system here. So with the folder, if I right click on the inventory folder, the primary folder, and go in here and go migrate, we're going to get a list of everything that will be moved into a project if we were to migrate it. If you go through this list, if there's anything in here that shouldn't be in here, that means that you're probably not quite as portable as you should be. For example, right here, we've got the starter content. Now this is just because we're using a couple basic shapes to represent the objects in the world. Really, we could take these, since we're using them, I can take these shapes in this material and really should probably take these and move these inside of the items folder. Once we actually create the actual meshes and stuff for it, that's where they will reside in. So generally speaking, this is all portable. We've got the interfaces here. Now this interface should probably be under the inventory file system here, but I'm keeping it out just to kind of keep it separated because, you know, in a bigger project, I'm going to want all my interfaces in the same place. But this is everything that we need for this particular project. Now we can take this and move it out. Now, a quick example of what would make this not modular. Let's say if in our inventory, let's open this up here, in our inventory component here, if we open this up and somewhere in here, say begin play, say we came in here and we cast a variable to hold the player character in it, right? Well, if by doing that, it now creates a hard reference to the third person character or whatever character you're using in this particular project, which means now if I were to migrate this out, it's going to require that I also take this particular character, the player controller, and the mesh, and the materials that apply to the mesh, and everything that goes along with it. It's going to want to take that over to the next project. We don't need that, right? So that's why it's important to use things like we have here with interfaces. We're going to end up having another interface here in today's video, but make it as modular as possible. Try not to have hard references for the items for here. Like I said, with this inventory component, don't make any hard references on here. Use interfaces where you need to. And then when you move this over, really you should put in code to like little warning systems to have it checked to make sure that you're implementing the proper interfaces, things like that. So that way, if you take and put this on a different character or something in a different project, it's going to check to see if you have the interface. If you don't have the interface, it knows it's not going to run properly, and it'll give you a warning in like the output log or something like that. But yeah, so try to keep your projects as modular as possible. So that way, you know, you don't want to have to do all this code and then not have it work anywhere other than in what you're doing here. So all right, so let's go ahead and get today's video started. All right, let's go ahead and open up your content drawer. And in here, let's go ahead and create a new widget blueprint. User widget. I'm going to name mine WBP underscore inventory slot. Go ahead and open this up. Now this is just going to be a little widget that we're going to use to represent the item within the inventory and allow us to be able to use the item. So just like in the last one, we're just going to kind of build this up a little bit. So let's start with a canvas panel, drop it in here on top of the primary inventory slot. And for the fill screen, I'm going to come up here to fill screen and change it to custom. And my custom size, I want it to be a width and a height of 100. And this is just going to be the size of the button. Now, depending on how you're setting it up, how big you want your buttons to be, and your primary HUD panel and all that good stuff is going to be dependent on how big you want this button. For me, for now, this is going to fit us perfectly for our current needs. So I'm going to leave it at 100, 100. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab a button now. Take the button, let's drag it down and put it on the canvas panel. I'm going to name my button use button. Make sure that is variable is checked. We want to be able to use this one. And you can see here, the button doesn't fill up our entire screen. But it's got a size X of 100. Let's change the size Y to also be 100. So now it fills it up here. And you can kind of see here how the box is a little bit rounded. It's not too big of a deal because this really isn't going to be drawn, but I don't want that. So let's come down here under style. If this isn't open up for you, find under appearance, style, open this up. Under normal, let's go ahead and change the draw to just a regular box. And you're gonna see that's gonna fill it out the entire way. For the image, we're not gonna worry about the image. We're actually gonna use a thumbnail or a different image that we're gonna end up using as the thumbnail icon. But what we do have to do is come in here into tint. And for the alpha, let's go ahead and turn this all the way down. We don't actually want to see the button under the normal state. Okay. One thing I do want to do, you probably saw it at the beginning, when we hover over the button when it's inside the inventory, I want this little ring, this little border to go around to indicate that we're currently over the cell. And when we click the cell, I want it to just kind of have another tint. So we got a couple phases in here, a couple styles in here. We got hovered and we got pressed. So if we expand both of these out, what I'm going to do is I created a couple images to be able to do that. If you're a Patreon supporter, and you're able to download the project, then these will be included with the project. But there's nothing special with these. Just use GIMP or Photoshop. Heck, you could probably even do it in Microsoft Paint. Just create a little bit border window for it, and you can just use them and drag and drop in. They're really nothing special. But I'm going to go ahead and open up the content drawer. First, inside the widget folder, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this one Textures. And I'm going to jump in here into the textures folder, right click, and I'm going to go import to. And now I've got these two images in here. I've got two separate images, and I'm just going to select both of them and click open. Now they come in here, and I'm going to change like I did before. I'm going to go ahead and edit each one of these. Click edit. And I'm going to change the compression settings just like I've done before to BC7. Now, some of you might be saying, hey, why not use the user interface? You can do that. But if you look at the documentation, the compression used for these BC7 and user interface, they actually use the exact same compression algorithm to do this. So it doesn't really matter which one you choose. I'm going to stick with BC7 just for, to remain compatible or to be the same as with everything else I've done. So be consistent. Yes, that's what I was looking for. And let's go ahead and save all those, and that should be good. And you can come in here and you can change the texture group. We can change this to be user interface or whatever in here. I'm not going to worry about the texture groups right at this point. So go ahead and close those down. So now back in here inside of our inventory slot under hovered for the image, I'm just going to change this to button hover, and everything else I believe should be the same. I'm going to change this also down to box. The image size should be 100 by 100. I did make these at 100. If you create these yourself, make them the size of your widget here. You can actually make them a little bit bigger. It will shrink down fine, but don't make them any smaller, you know, because it will pixelate when you try to scale them up. So at least make them the size of whatever your window size is here. And then for the pressed, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select the other one. I did the button hover pressed, which is essentially the same thing with just a semi-transparent blue background to simulate when it's being pressed. Now I want to come down here to the normal padding and the press padding, and I'm actually going to change these to 0. So 0 across the board, so there's no padding in here with this. And the last thing for now is scroll down to the interaction is focusable. We do not want this to be focusable, so go ahead and uncheck that. So now it is false. Let's go ahead and grab an overlay and drag it, and let's set it now on top of the button. So now it's nested underneath the button. Select this, and with the overlay, let's go ahead and let's come up here now to the horizontal alignment and select to stretch it all the way to the side, and then the vertical alignment, stretch it all the way to the side. One thing, I did have an issue with this before. Now it didn't do it here, but when I went to go stretch it, it wasn't stretching all the way across for some reason. I don't know why, and I spent probably about an hour trying to solve it, and I still don't. It was just an editor bug or something that happened. If you end up getting that, all I did was I came up here to the padding and I just reset these numbers. It's defaulted to 4 and 2, which we're actually going to end up leaving it here at the default values, but I just changed these and then moved them back, and it went back to normal. So if you have that bug, then just go ahead, and that's how I ended up fixing it. So hopefully you don't get it. But yeah, so you can see here, we've got this completely filled out. So aside from that, that's really all we need to do for the overlay. So now we need to we're going to put 3 items underneath here, and I'm just going to drop them all in right now. First, we're going to start with a text. Let's just go ahead and grab a text, drop it onto the overlay. Next, we need an image. This is going to be for our thumbnail. Drop it on the overlay again. It should be the second one now in the box. And then go ahead and grab one more text item and put it on the overlay there. Go ahead and select the first text block here. What we need to do is come up here now, and we're just going to change the horizontal alignment to be center alignment, and then to be the bottom alignment here. We want this to come down, and I'm going to change the text to say item name. Now we're going to end up changing this down the road. This is going to be the actual item name. We're just going to do this for prototype. Come up here and make sure that is variable is checked. And we're going to change the font size to be 10. So now it's going to sit down here at the bottom of our button, and whatever it's going to be, bread, whatever, it's going to be down here in this box. Next, let's go ahead and actually I'm going to change the name of this one because it is going to be a variable. We're going to call this item name, so that way we have good representation of what this is. So it's the item name. Now for the image, go ahead and select your image, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to name mine thumbnail. Again, make sure it is a variable. It should be defaulted because it's an image and they usually default that way. So what we need to do with this one now is we're going to change some paddings here in the size first. Let's go ahead and stretch the size out here horizontally and vertically. Now we get it to fill up in here. That's what we want to do, but let's go ahead and add a little bit of some padding in here. The padding I did was actually, let's go 5, 1, 5, and then this bottom one, we're going to do 18. So what this is going to do is it's going to bring it up tall enough to be above our text here. So, and this kind of squares it out the way we have this here. Just kind of makes a nice looking square. All right, really that's going to be it for the thumbnail. So go ahead and select this last text now. And this one we're going to actually end up using to show the quantity inside the inventory. So I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to change the name of this to be amount text. So that way I know it's a text and it's going to be the amount of the item. Let's go ahead and make sure this too is a variable. So I'm going to change the color of this to be a green. You could change it to be whatever you want. Let's just go ahead. I'm just gonna make it a solid green. Then we come down here and I'm gonna change the size of this now to be size 8. Let's go ahead and change the vertical and horizontal alignment to be right justified, as well as the bottom aligned vertically. So now it's going to come down here. So now we need to go ahead and add some padding to this. Let's go ahead and just open up the padding here. So from the bottom, what I did for mine, this particular size, and again, just play around, whatever's going to be best for your design. But I did a bottom of 20 and a right of 10. Okay, and now I'm going to come down here. I'm going to change this. I'm just going to put in a 0, right? You can do, if you know, if you want to see how it looks, put in 99 or something. So now you can just kind of see how it's going to look inside of your little button. And that's going to be it for the design of this button. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So now we just got everything else we're going to end up doing is going to be, you know, pretty simple code. Now let's go ahead and head into your inventory component. We got a little bit of work to do in here, nothing too major, but we got to get a few things started here so that we can actually have the inventory working. So let's go ahead and let's create a new variable, and I'm going to call this one capacity, and this is going to just tell us how big our inventory should be. Let's make this an integer, and this is something that can be dynamically changed throughout the game. You know, like say the character finds a backpack and you want to expand the inventory, or have different types of backpacks that have extra storage, things like that. This can be changed later on down the road, but for now we're just going to leave this and compile it so we can set the default value. I'm just going to default mine to 10 right now. So this is going to represent 10 item slots within the inventory. You can't go any bigger than that for this particular inventory. Whatever you put it on, you know, you can change this. So on the player, we'll go into the player and we can change the inventory for that. This is just the default value for the component. Next, let's create another variable here, and I'm going to call this one items, and I'm going to give it a type of F inventory item, and I'm going to change this to be an array. So this is going to actually be the list of all our items. This is actually what's going to hold all of our items within the inventory component. Let's go ahead and create a second variable here. Now this one, I'm going to call this one B is hotbar. This is going to kind of go along with the inventory widget. What this is going to end up being, I'm going to change this to a Boolean designated by the B, and don't want this to be a variable, just a single. Even though this is going to be a drag and drop system, within our current setup, the way we're going to end up doing this is the hotbar is going to be a different style widget than the player inventory or the storage inventory for that matter. So it's going to have to be handled a little bit differently because, you know, typically a hotbar is only going to be a set number of slots, like 5, or some games have like a 10 item slot down at the bottom of the screen, and it's handled differently. So because of that, the default value of this, make sure the default value is going to be false, because generally speaking, anything you put this on, it's not going to be a hotbar, but we're going to drop 2 of these on the player character when we do a hotbar, and then the one we want to designate as a hotbar, we will select that, so we can handle a little bit differently. You'll see a little bit what I'm talking about with that. But let's go ahead now and grab your items inventory, drag it out here, and let's get it. And we want to resize this inventory size right here, and what we're going to resize it to, so we're going to resize it to our capacity. So drag this out and plug that into the resize there. So now our inventory, what we're doing by doing this, by setting the size of this inventory right off the bat, is it's going to automatically reserve those slots for us, because whether there's anything in that inventory slot or not, we need to have a space for it. You'll see when we start putting the buttons on the screen, why we need those slots. Without that slot, you're not going to be able to drag and drop around. So like I said, even if you don't have anything in inventory slot, we still need to reserve a button for the space. So when we're dragging and dropping stuff around, we have a place to swap with it. So you'll see that as we move a little bit forward, but this is a very important step. So go ahead and do that. So now what we need to do, let's go ahead and do a for each loop, and grab again your items variable. Let's plug that into the array, And what we need to do in here now is now we need to create, now we've got the size of our array. In this case, defaulted to 10, so now there's going to be 10 of them in here. So now we need to get this variable again, and we need to set array element. Again, this is going to reserve it even though there's not going to be anything in here. And we're actually going to set this up a little bit down the road to where we can start the player with some starting items. We're not going to do that. We're not going to handle that right now because that'll work best when we're actually able to add and delete things from our inventory procedurally or at runtime. So until we do that, we're not going to worry about setting that up right off the bat. So let's go ahead and now for the array element of this item, right? We've got an index, we've got an item, and so we need to fill those up. Okay, so I'm actually going to expand the item right here. I'm going to split the struct, so now we get all this extra information in here. All right, so the default class, we're actually going to set this to the BP base item, and it doesn't look like that I've actually set this BP base item to be a abstract class, which it should be. I could have swore I did that in a previous episode, but we're going to set that to the BP base item. If you did already set this to the abstract class, then you're going to actually have to find it in the content browser, have it highlighted, and then select the little arrow to populate it. The item quantity, now this is important, make sure this is 0. We don't want anything right here to be defaulted because we're going to use this quantity to help us do some things with our widget in a little bit. Now the item owning inventory. This is another important one, right? So type self. We're just going to get reference to the inventory component itself because you can have 1,000 of these in the world, but they're all unique. Even though the same ones, they're all unique. So whoever owns this particular inventory, we need to know. So go ahead and put that in there. Self for the owning item inventory. Now for the index, take the array index right here off of the for loop, and this is going to be the array index of this particular item. So now it's going to loop all the way through, and again we're going to come in here and set the index right there. All right, so now this is all set up. So now when this starts up, it's going to loop through, and we're going to create an empty inventory item in each one of these depending on the size of the capacity. So in the context of what I was talking about a little bit earlier about being modular, when you're designing things like this, you got to try to think about what should logically handle what. Now, there's a lot of things that you can put on the player character to handle and just kind of spread out, but you try to put things in a logical manner. So, for instance, adding an object to or an item to the inventory, right? That could be handled on the player character. We could take the item that we're interacting with and do all the code on the player character, but now we need the player character, that this one particular player character, in this case, the true first person, in everything we do, right? To add an item, and that's not very modular. That's not what we're looking for. So everything should be handled in the proper location. So with that said, here in the inventory component, I'm going to add a function right now, just because logically I know I'm going to need it, not just because I'm further ahead in the project, but because I know that we're going to end up needing it, right? So when we add an object or drop an object or drag and drop an object within the inventory, we need to be able to update the HUD. Right, so since we're in here, just to prevent from having to jump back and forth between blueprints, I'm going to come in here. We got a new function here, and I'm going to name this new function update inventory HUD. Okay, and we're just going to leave this blank. We will come back and fill this in a little bit later, but this is going to help us set something up here on our player character. So let's go ahead and compile it and make sure that this is going to end up showing in here. And let's go ahead and jump over to our first person character here. So now we're going to need to call the update inventory. And actually the way we're going to do that, let's jump into our, let's see, do we have it? Yes, the blueprint interface interact HUD, right? This is where we have the open player inventory. We're going to add another one. So just go ahead and click add here, add function. And I'm going to call this function update inventory HUD. Right, for this though, we want an input on this one, and I'm going to call this input inventory component. We want to be able to pass along the AC underscore inventory component. So whichever inventory, whether it's the storage container or the player or the HUD or whichever inventory it is, we want that particular inventory to call to be passed along into this update inventory. So go ahead and set that up there. Go ahead and compile now and come back into your true first person character. And now in here, we've got access to that new function in the interface, update inventory HUD. So double click that. And really all we want this one to do for now is drag out our primary HUD. Let's get it and go update inventory, which actually we haven't even set up yet. So let's go back now to our primary HUD and select a graph. And on the event graph, let's create a new function, and we will call this one, I'm sure you guessed it, update inventory. So that's kind of a roundabout way to do it, but I think it's an important way to do it, right? The inventory component is being called, or this is going to end up calling the interface call on the player from the player, because the player has access to the HUD. And you can pass this variable around all you want, but remember, the more we pass this variable around, if we cast this variable on the inventory component, it doesn't make it modular. Now we have to have this widget to go along if we want to migrate this to another project. And in that other project, that widget may be something totally different. Then you got to totally rewrite the code. So that's why we put this here with the interfaces. So this interface can be implemented on whatever character you're using in a different project. And all you have to do is implement these functions on that character that you want to use. So this is why we're doing it this way. And then of course, because like I said, with modularity, back here on the primary HUD, this is updating the information within the HUD. So it seems kind of like a long roundabout way to do it, but to keep things nice and modular, this is a good way to go. All right, so now I think we got all the pieces here. We can build this little system right here for the update inventory. So let's go ahead. We need to actually add an input for this because we're passing around the inventory component. So let's go inventory component, and of course, make it of type AC underscore inventory component object reference. So now we've got this. So now what we need to do is we're going to add our inventory window to the inventory slot into the inventory window. So first thing, drag off of our inventory component, and let's check to see is hotbar. Get is hotbar. Run a branch here. And if it is a hotbar, we're going to handle it a little bit differently, but we don't have the hotbar set up yet. So we'll worry about that in a later one. So for now, let's just go ahead and add a return node here. And we'll just end if it is hotbar, then we don't want to do anything at this point. We'll come back, put in a little comment here, handle hotbar update. Okay, so we've got that. And because I like to be consistent here, let's just go ahead and make that yellow. That'll work. So now we come down here on false. So it's not a hotbar. So what do we need to do? Well, let's grab the inventory component. Go inventory component. Let's get the variable. If you didn't know, you could do this when you're passing in a variable and internal of a function. It kind of makes it into a local variable, so you don't really have to set this into a local variable. You can call it out anywhere you want within the function itself. So drag off the inventory component. Let's go get owner. So now this is going to check who the owner is. Is it going to be the player character, or is it a storage unit or anything like that? So something's going to own this inventory component. We want to check to see if it is equal to get player character. We want to make sure, is it the player character? Okay, so That means, are we just opening up whatever's calling this update inventory? Is it the player's inventory, or is it a store? If it's not, then it must be a storage unit, because we already handled hotbar up here. So because the hotbar will be owned by the player too, but we're handling that before we ever check this. So let's go ahead, and instead of running a branch, what we're going to do is we're going to run a select. Grab a select, and we're going to plug this down into the index of the select. So now what do we need to do for true or false? Well, what we're going to do is actually, let's go back into the designer really fast. We've got our inventory window right here, and I'm going to change the name of this to be primary inventory window. Right, so now we've got that. This is the primary inventory window. Let's go ahead, and we're actually going to add another one of these really quick, just to represent where the storage one will go. So let's grab another one, another inventory window, drag and drop it on top of the canvas panel, and I'm going to change the name of this to be secondary inventory window. Again, make sure it is a variable. So what we're going to do, come down here, you can see this little green box. Let's change the anchor point first to be the right. We're going to put it over here. You can see the green box here. This represents the size of the window. We don't want it that, so we need to size the contents. Now it's going to fill up the entire thing. Let's clear out the position X, and you're going to see it's going to set it all the way over here. To set this up, the alignment here, let's go ahead and set the alignment, the first alignment box to be 1. That's going to push it all the way over here. And let's go ahead and add the padding here. If you remember correctly, for this one, we set the padding to be 50 and 25. So we need to change this to be position X. Let's change this to be -50, and then just set this to be 25. And there we go. So now it kind of mirrors this on the other side, but we don't need this one to show up yet. So come down here under behavior, visibility, and let's change that down to collapsed. Go ahead and compile it now. So now we got both of our main windows. We'll add the hotbar in a later video. Head back over to the graph. So now we've got the two variables right here. So does this belong to the player character? True, we want to come down here and we want to plug in the primary inventory window. So this is why we have to handle the hotbar differently, because it's going to be a different widget. It's not going to be the same one, but because we're using the same type of widget for the other inventory, we can pull this out. It's the exact same being passed through. It's the exact same widget, just a duplicate of it, and we're going to push that into false. So now if this belongs to player character, we're going to update the primary inventory window, and if not, we're going to update the secondary inventory window. So what do we need to update? Go ahead and drag off of this now, and remember we've created the inventory, and I spelled that wrong, get inventory box, right? This inventory box is a wrap box that we're going to end up putting all these slots into. So drag off of this. First, we need to clear the children. So if there's already things in this inventory, we just need to clear it. We need to wipe it free, clean, so we can add our new stuff in there in the position it belongs. So clear children, and then grab we're gonna need this a couple times, so grab a duplicate of the inventory component variable from the beginning. Now remember, this belongs to this up here, right? So drag off of this, and let's get the items array. All right, now in this items array, what we need to do is now we need to loop over this. So go ahead and drag off of this and go for each loop. We don't need a break on it, so just a regular for each loop. With this, with each loop, what we need to do now is we need to go create widget. All right, well, what widget are we going to create? Well, that's the inventory slot that we just created. So the WBP inventory slot. Open that up. And there's actually one thing we need to do real quick before we go any further. Let's go ahead and jump back into the inventory slot that we created. And we need to add a variable in here. So go to the graph, come down here and click add variable. And let's go ahead and add a variable called item F underscore, or just F inventory item. There we go. So this is going to be the individual item that's going to be stored on this particular slot when it gets created. So we need to actually make this expose it on spawn and instance editable, compile it. So now if we head back to the primary HUD window, we don't see it in here yet, so just go ahead and right click on the create widget node and go to refresh nodes, and there we go, it pops up. So now every time we create one, we take this particular item that we're looping through, we add it to that inventory slot. So now that slot knows which item it is holding. Okay, so now we've got that. So now what do we do with the slot? The slot has got its item. So what do we do with the slot? Well, now we need to drag back off of this, and let's get the inventory box again. Go inventory, get inventory box. I'm gonna add in a reroute node, just make it a little bit cleaner. Okay, and from here, drag off this and go add child to wrap box. All right, so now we're going to add this inventory slot, drag off of here, and we're going to drag it on and put it onto the child wrap box. So now as we create each one, it's going to add it in here. And the nice thing about a wrap box, what it does, let me show you here, just kind of demonstrate, is inside this window, depending on how big you make this, right? We did the slots to be 100 pixels each. Well, this particular window we designed to be what, like 500 inventory window. We designed this to be 535 pixels wide, this entire thing. Well, we made each of our slots 100 each. So that means we're going to be able to put 5 slots in here on a particular row, and if our inventory has more, which it will, it's defaulted to 10, we put 20 on here, 18 on here, whatever you want to put on here. Anything over what will fit in this row will automatically drop to the next one. So if you have 100 item capacity, this window can't obviously handle 100. It's not going to expand, but this particular one will create a little scroll box, and you can actually come in and you can make the inventory box. It's right here. This is actually what's going to get filled up in here. You can actually change a lot of features with this and the way it handles certain items as it's wrapping through. So we're not going to worry about that because I've set it up to be pretty nice as it sits in here. But it will have a scroll box in here if it goes too large. That may be something you do or don't want. Just figure it out for your game. But that's the way that this is going to end up working. Okay, so we're going to put it in here. So every 5 rows or every 5 slots is going to start a new row and move its way down. Okay, and head back over to primary HUD and go back into the graph, and that's pretty much it that we need to do for that for right now. All right, take a look at that if you need to. All right, that really should be about it. I'm going to drag off here, and I'm just going to add a return node just to wrap this up under the completed, and that really should pretty much wrap it up. We got a couple other things in here just to tidy up. Let's head back into the inventory component. Let's finish up this update inventory HUD. For now, we don't need too much. Let's go ahead and get player character. There it is. And from here, again, because we wanted this to be modular, now we can just call the update inventory HUD message. So now anytime this inventory has to update itself, it'll just call the player character. Doesn't matter what character and what project you're using, it's going to get the exact one that is being used. And then we just want to pass along our self. So grab a self node and just plug it into the inventory component right there and return. And this is nice and finished. We may come back and have to add some more stuff to this in the future, but for now, that should be it. Head back over to the first person character. And then, so now what we need to do is we need to come down here and just plug this in now that we got this set up in the inventory call, and then the inventory component that's being passed through. Let's drag that in right there. And then finally, let's go ahead and when we open up the inventory, we do still want to call that, we want to call this update. So when we open it, even though the inventory is not doing it, the inventory doesn't know when it's initially opened. It just knows when it's been changed. So let's drag off of here and go update inventory HUD. We don't need to make the call to the function or the message call itself. Just grab update inventory, and then we're just going to grab our inventory component, which actually we have not added yet. So let's go ahead and add that component now. There it is, AC inventory component. And I'm just going to go primary inventory. I misspelled it. Inventory. There we go. So now drag and drop this out and plug that into the inventory component that we want to pass in. And so now it should update. So now if we go into select the primary inventory and we come up here into the defaults, you can see we have a capacity right here of 10. We're just going to leave it at 10 right now while we test this, and this should be it. If we cross our fingers, compile it and save it, make sure everything's good to go. If we hit press play, hit tab, and there we go. We get all our inventory items in here. So now you can see every time we hover over an object, we get our little nice outline right there. And whenever we click, you can kind of see that we get that little nice blue overlay on it, and you can see it's actually rounding out the box. I obviously didn't change that one to be a box. It's still rounded corners, so I might go back and change that because it's messing up with my little image in there. But yeah, so that's it. So if we come back out here, oops, let's go ahead and exit out of the game. So now if we come back out here, let's just add a capacity of 20. Press play now. Come back in here and we've got 20. See, 5, 10, 15, 20 all the way down. So let me show you what I was talking about with wrapping it. Let's just add 50 capacity here and press play. Come in here and there you go. But because it adds this scroll bar here, and again, like I said, there's options. I think you can actually eliminate this scroll bar, make it invisible, but because it's added this, now it only has 4, so it's actually condensed this down. So something to keep in mind if you're going to end up doing that. But you've got the scroll bar now and you can use your wheel or whatever and scroll through. So that's pretty much it. So yeah, let's go ahead and let me show you guys what this looks like real quick with the back out of here. Let's just go back into the, let's go into the inventory slot, go back to the designer, and for the thumbnail brush, let's change the image for the brush to be the, we'll just do the bread icon. Press play. There you go. Now all the items have the bread icon. So yeah, we're going to obviously be able to change all this dynamically. That's why we set up all the code in the other object classes and the item classes and all that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and reset that. I don't want it to be any. Well, there it is. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please do me a favor, go down and hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, think about subscribing while you're down there. Hit that notification button to be updated whenever we do something new. And yeah, leave me a comment if you guys have any questions or any problems with this. Come on over to the Discord. You can talk to me over there. I'm a little bit more accessible over there on the Discord. And until next time, peace.